He thought it was just another walk into the woods. But soon, every trace he left behind would become the only clues to uncovering his fate. Each object tells a story. Each discovery pulls investigators deeper. And each step reveals a truth darker than anyone expected. Under the pale glow of the early morning sun, the brick walls of the small-town high school stood silent, its flag barely moving in the breeze, the courtyard eerily empty as if holding its breath, and inside, teachers and students slowly began to notice something unusual. One figure was missing, the man who was always first to arrive, the janitor who, for nearly 15 years, had kept the halls polished, the lockers unjammed, and the boilers humming. His absence was unsettling not only because of the broken routine but because of the quiet reliability that defined him, the way he moved like part of the building itself, a fixture of the school. Yet on that morning his closet door remained locked, his rolling cart still in its place by the gym, and the principal, uneasy, called the police to check when he failed to answer repeated calls. When officers finally entered the cramped janitorial room tucked away behind the cafeteria, they were met with an odd, almost staged stillness. The man's jacket hung neatly on the hook as if he had just stepped away, his keys neatly arranged on the shelf, and his old lunch pail sat closed on the desk. Yet the strangeness deepened when one officer noticed a folded note left in plain view beside the mop sink, its edges damp from a dripping pipe overhead, and the handwriting, tight and deliberate, read, "Don't look for me, this was the only way." Words that immediately shifted the scene from a case of simple absenteeism into a mystery that none of them could easily explain. For how could a man who lived such a routine life, who had never shown signs of despair or discontent, suddenly vanish with only a cryptic message left behind? And why would he abandon all of his belongings, including his wallet and watch, as though he never planned to use them again? The police sealed off the room, taking photographs of the shelves stacked with cleaning supplies, the lined-up cans of paint thinner and boxes of gloves, every detail suddenly looking less mundane, more suspicious, and they began to question staff about the janitor, a man in his 50s, quiet but courteous, always willing to help fix a stuck window or carry boxes for teachers, a man with no known family close by, only a sister in another state who hadn't spoken to him in months, and as interviews went on, a strange picture began to form, one of a solitary man who kept journals no one had ever read, who sometimes lingered long after midnight in the halls when no one was around, claiming he preferred to clean when the school was quiet, though now the quietness felt heavy, ominous. The note was sent to analysis, the room dusted for prints, but nothing unusual appeared, only the man's own fingerprints everywhere, reinforcing the impression that he had been alone. Yet the question persisted, alone when he left, or alone when he wrote the message? Rumors spread quickly among the students, whispers about how he might have known something, seen something, or been hiding secrets inside that locked closet, while teachers argued whether the man had been depressed, pointing out that his old sedan still sat in the staff parking lot untouched, a thin layer of dust already gathering on the hood, suggesting he hadn't driven away. Detectives began to comb through the security footage, only to discover that, strangely, several hours of recording from the previous night were missing, erased or never saved. A technical glitch according to the school's IT manager. Though it had never happened before, and that absence of proof became its own kind of evidence, fueling suspicion that someone wanted his last movements hidden. The chief investigator, a man who had once lost a brother to an unexplained disappearance in the wilderness, felt an uncanny echo in the case, the same silence, the same lack of trace, and he drove to the janitor's small rented house on the edge of town, where the curtains were drawn and the mailbox stuffed with bills. But inside, everything was in place, his bed neatly made, the kitchen clean, the refrigerator stocked for the week, nothing missing except the man himself, no sign of a struggle, no open windows, no forced doors, just the unsettling sensation that he had stepped out and never returned. And back at the station the note sat on the evidence table, the words scrutinized by experts who debated whether they hinted at desperation, escape, or warning, each theory spinning a different path. Had the janitor uncovered something at the school he wasn't supposed to see, or was he running from a private shame, or had someone forced him to write it? As the first day passed, then the second, the town grew restless, with parents demanding answers, children swapping ghost stories, and the school board pressing the police for resolution. But the deeper the detectives looked, the stranger it became, because behind the shelves in the janitor's closet, an officer found scrape marks on the floor, as if something heavy had been moved repeatedly, and when they shifted the shelving unit aside, they revealed a small hidden hatch in the wall, long sealed but recently disturbed, Dust swept away, the padlock broken, leading into a narrow service tunnel that no one had used in decades, a passage running beneath the old wing of the school, its darkness swallowing the beam of their flashlights, and though they dared not descend without backup, the discovery left everyone with a new and haunting question, one that would shape the investigation from that moment on. Had the janitor used that tunnel to leave unseen, or had someone else used it to take him away? Night had fallen over the small town by the time the investigation into the missing janitor entered its second day, and the school that had once felt like a place of structure and familiarity now seemed altered, its hallways echoing with unease, its staff room filled with whispered speculation and the occasional startled glance toward the locked janitor's closet, where police tape hung limply across the doorway. The discovery of the hidden hatch had unsettled everyone, for the existence of a tunnel no one knew about suggested that the building itself carried secrets older than the staff or students who occupied it, and detectives, wary but determined, prepared to explore it, descending with flashlights and protective masks into a stale underground corridor lined with cracked concrete and rusted pipes, where graffiti from decades past stretched across the walls like voices of forgotten students, the air heavy with mold and silence, their beams revealing scattered debris, an old broom, a rusted toolbox, empty soda cans from some long-ago worker, and deeper inside they found fresh scuff marks in the dust, unmistakable signs that someone had recently walked there, though whether it was the janitor or someone pursuing him remained unclear. The tunnel branched in two directions, one leading toward the boiler room and the other stretching beyond the school's foundation, sealed by a rusted iron door bolted shut, but the bolts bore signs of tampering, as if tools had been used to force it open, and on the ground near the threshold they found a scrap of cloth, gray and frayed, that matched the uniform jacket the janitor wore every day, leaving investigators to wonder whether he had escaped through that door or been dragged against his will. While the tunnel team reported their findings, officers continued to canvass the town, interviewing neighbors who described the janitor as a quiet man who kept to himself, polite but distant, though one elderly neighbor recalled seeing a white delivery truck parked outside his house late at night 2 days before he vanished, its engine running with no driver in sight, and when pressed, she admitted that she heard what she thought were voices arguing, though she couldn't make out the words, and dismissed it at the time. Detectives traced delivery companies, but none admitted to having trucks in the area, and that single unexplained sighting grew heavier in the file, especially when paired with the missing security footage at the school, creating a pattern of erased trails and half-seen moments that suggested planning rather than accident. At the same time, digital forensics revealed that the janitor's personal laptop, retrieved from his modest home, contained drafts of unsent emails addressed to no one in particular, cryptic fragments of thought that read like journal entries, one mentioning things they hide in plain sight, another warning. When they realize I know, it will be too late, and yet none of the files had been sent, as if he had been torn between silence and confession. His sister, contacted in another state, described him as cautious but deeply loyal, someone who once worked night shifts at a factory where he claimed to have seen documents he wasn't supposed to see, though she dismissed his claims at the time as paranoia, and now she wished she had asked more questions, her voice breaking when she heard about the note in his closet. The second day ended without answers, but with more questions, and by the third day the case began drawing regional attention, news vans circling the school, students interviewed on camera about the man who had once fixed their lockers now turned into a symbol of mystery, and the police chief, visibly exhausted, admitted to the press that foul play could not be ruled out. Meanwhile, search dogs were brought to the tunnel, their noses catching faint traces of human scent leading toward the iron door, and when officers finally cut through the rusted bolts and forced it open, they emerged into a disused maintenance corridor beneath the town itself, part of an old utility line long abandoned, stretching into darkness, with patches of collapsed ceiling that made passage treacherous. But the most chilling discovery came halfway down the corridor where, lodged against the wall, was a small black SD card wrapped in tape, as if intentionally hidden but hastily, and when examined back at the lab it revealed corrupted files. Grainy images of the school hallways at night, captured from angles not matching any known security cameras, showing the janitor walking alone, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth, pausing to glance over his shoulder as if aware he was being watched, and then the footage cut abruptly, replaced with static, leaving investigators to wonder who had placed the card there and why it was hidden underground rather than handed to authorities. The implication was that the janitor had either uncovered secret surveillance within the school or had been caught in someone else's hidden recording system, and if so, the missing hours from the official security footage were not technical errors but deliberate removal, tying the threads together into a larger web. Tension rose among the investigative team, some convinced the janitor was complicit, others sure he was a victim. And in the middle of this debate, one detective pointed out a detail in the video. A faint reflection in a trophy case as the janitor passed, suggesting another figure just outside the frame, taller and broader, whose outline didn't match the janitor's build, someone following him. The revelation deepened suspicions, and when the footage was shown to his sister she shook her head, whispering that he looked frightened, not guilty, and begged the detectives to consider that he might have been coerced. The school board, increasingly uneasy about the reputation of their institution, attempted to restrict access to records, claiming privacy, but the police obtained a warrant and discovered unusual orders in the school's maintenance budget. Purchases of industrial cleaning chemicals in bulk quantities far exceeding normal use, all signed off under the janitor's name, though receipts bore signatures that looked forged, and one container, retrieved from the storage room, tested positive for traces of toxic compounds. Substances banned for general custodial work, raising the chilling possibility that someone had used his position as a cover to store dangerous materials. The mystery now stretched beyond a man's disappearance into the realm of conspiracy, implicating either outsiders using the school as cover or insiders masking illicit activity, and the janitor's role remained unclear. Had he discovered it, or had he been framed as the one responsible? Late that night, as detectives pored over the evidence, one officer returned from the tunnel with news that the ground near the iron door contained tire tracks leading out into the forest beyond the edge of town, fresh enough to have been made in the last week, and when compared with a neighbor's report of the white truck, the pieces aligned too neatly to ignore, pushing investigators to plan a search of the wooded area at first light. As dawn broke, teams combed the narrow dirt roads deep into the trees, their radios crackling as they found fragments along the path, discarded gloves, a length of rope, and finally a small metal tag bearing the janitor's initials scratched into it, as if torn from a keychain, left deliberately or dropped in struggle. The forest search. The investigation into the missing school janitor had by now moved from a confusing anomaly to a full-scale operation. Yet the more the police uncovered, the less sense it all seemed to make, and in the third week after his disappearance, the hallways of the school that once smelled of chalk, floor polish, and childhood laughter were replaced by the echo of whispers and speculation, as students, teachers, and even parents hovered on edge with the thought that something dark had been hiding all along in a place they thought was safe. Detectives had combed through his locker and his tiny storage room countless times, yet each return revealed the same haunting picture: his belongings neatly stacked, his jacket folded with almost ritualistic care, his keys hung precisely on their hook, and the note left behind, a single sheet of paper smudged from the touch of too many gloved hands, still carrying the words that made no sense. It wasn't supposed to happen here. A sentence that only deepened the mystery rather than explain it, because who was it referring to, and what exactly was not supposed to happen? The forensic unit had analyzed the handwriting, confirming it was indeed his, but what unsettled everyone most was the fact that his tone sounded neither desperate nor resigned, rather calculated, almost like someone leaving a cryptic clue. And the detectives knew enough about missing persons cases to understand that people who truly planned to vanish often left behind chaos, not careful order, which made this disappearance gnaw at them in ways that suggested a hidden hand was at play. As they expanded their search, they discovered security footage from the night before his absence, grainy and half obscured, but it captured the janitor moving methodically through the corridors long after midnight, pushing his cart with its familiar squeak. Yet at one point he stopped near the gymnasium doors, set down the mop, and stood completely still for almost 2 minutes, staring at something just beyond the camera's range, before abruptly wheeling the cart away, leaving behind an eerie question of what, or who, had captured his attention. When detectives examined the gym, they found nothing conclusive, but an old side exit door bore fresh scratches along the frame, as if someone had been prying it open, though there was no sign of forced entry in the locks, leading investigators to suspect that whoever might have been inside had either been let in or had a key of their own. The janitor's co-workers were questioned again, and one teacher, a veteran of 30 years, reluctantly admitted she once overheard him talking in low tones to someone in the storage room late in the evenings, though when she asked him later who it was, he brushed it off with a nervous laugh, saying he must have been speaking to himself. Still, the detective took note of her discomfort and wondered if there was a second figure moving in and out of the school without anyone realizing it, perhaps using the janitor as a go-between, though no one could yet articulate why or how. Then came the discovery that truly shook the small town. The janitor's bank account, untouched for years except for direct deposits and the occasional grocery withdrawal, had been suddenly accessed 2 days after his disappearance, and a withdrawal of $500 had been made at an ATM on the outskirts of town. The camera at the ATM catching a shadowed figure wearing a hood and gloves, the face hidden, but the build and posture uncannily similar to the janitor himself. Though the detectives were split on whether it was really him or someone trying to mimic his appearance, and when they enhanced the footage, one unsettling detail emerged. The figure slipped something into the machine after the withdrawal, almost like leaving a message, but when investigators checked the ATM later, nothing was found, leading to speculation that a second party may have collected it in secret. Rumors spread fast, some believing the janitor had staged his disappearance to escape debts or a hidden past, others whispering darker possibilities that he had stumbled onto something within the school, a secret that was never meant to be seen, and someone had silenced him before he could reveal it. But the police, though intrigued by both theories, could not ignore the fact that every piece of evidence only opened another door of questions rather than closing one. Then, late one evening, as officers were preparing to wrap up for the night, a call came from the neighboring county. A fisherman had found a plastic bag snagged on the bank of the river, and inside were a set of school keys, a janitor's badge, and a small notebook warped from water but still intact, the cover scratched with strange markings that looked almost like initials or a code, and though no one could yet decipher it, the lead detective knew in his gut that the notebook was not discarded randomly. It was placed deliberately, as though whoever was behind this wanted the investigation to continue, wanted the police to keep searching, to keep peeling back layers of a puzzle that was now consuming the entire town. And as the detective flipped through the damp, fragile pages, he realized each entry was written in rushed fragments, half-thoughts about shadows, doors that creaked open when no one was there, and the chilling phrase repeated over and over, "They know I've seen it," forcing everyone to ask the question they had been avoiding from the start. What exactly had the janitor seen inside that school before he vanished into thin air? The discovery of the waterlogged notebook shifted the investigation into a darker and more obsessive phase, because as the detectives began to carefully transcribe the fragmented entries, they realized the janitor had not simply been recording idle thoughts but rather a growing paranoia, one that seemed tied directly to the school itself, and as they pieced together his scattered sentences, a picture began to emerge of a man who believed he was being watched, not just from shadows in the hallways but by individuals who somehow knew his every movement, with lines such as, "The door clicked though I locked it," "They pass by but I hear no footsteps," and "Someone else carries keys like mine," suggesting he may have stumbled upon someone moving through the school after hours with the same access and authority he held. The strangest part came from repeated references to the lower halls, a phrase no one initially understood until an older custodian, brought in for questioning, revealed that decades ago the school had a sub-basement, a storage level beneath the gymnasium that had long since been sealed off due to water damage, its entrance hidden behind drywall during a renovation in the early 90s. Yet the janitor's notes implied he had somehow found a way inside, scribbling, "Down there it's still alive, locked away but not gone," and "I hear the humming when the lights above are out." Cryptic sentences that left detectives unsettled because they suggested the janitor had been spending nights exploring areas of the building no one had entered in years. A search team was organized to verify the claim, and when they scanned the blueprints, sure enough, there it was, an entire lower level mapped out, now erased from public knowledge, and as officers used ground-penetrating radar along the gym floor, faint voids confirmed that empty chambers still existed beneath. Within days, construction crews were brought in to tear down a section of the wall where the old stairwell was believed to be, and the moment they breached the drywall, a rush of stale, damp air poured out, heavy with the smell of mildew and something faintly metallic, like rust or dried blood, a scent that made even the most hardened officers hesitate before stepping inside. The stairwell was narrow, steep, and coated in dust, with old pipes rattling faintly as though something deep below was still running, and as flashlights cut through the dark, they revealed a corridor lined with locked doors, each with rusted number plates, long forgotten. But one door in particular showed signs of recent use. Its handle was faintly polished, not corroded like the rest, and faint shoe prints trailed into the dust before vanishing against the concrete floor. When they forced the door open, the beam of the lights revealed a small room with scattered debris and an overturned chair, but in the corner, half covered by rags, was another personal item unmistakably belonging to the janitor. His old thermos, the same one staff members remembered seeing him carry every morning, and beside it lay a small folded piece of paper wrapped in plastic to shield it from moisture, the words inside scrawled in haste. "I can't keep this secret much longer if I disappear. It's because of what's below, not above." Panic began to ripple through the investigation team as they debated whether they had just uncovered the root of the man's disappearance, and some wondered if he had been silenced by someone else who also knew of this hidden level, while others whispered that perhaps he was still alive, somewhere deeper in the maze, unable or unwilling to surface. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Several rooms bore signs of old experiments or storage, strange containers marked with half-erased labels, notebooks with diagrams water-stained beyond recognition, and faint humming that seemed to come from behind one final locked door at the far end of the corridor, a door that appeared newer than the rest, its bolts shining as if installed in recent years, and as the lead detective placed his hand against it, he felt a faint vibration, proof that some machine or generator was still operating on the other side. But before they could attempt to break it open, orders came down from higher authorities to seal the area again until further notice, citing safety concerns. An action that only deepened suspicions among the local officers who had invested weeks into finding answers. The school board released a bland statement denying knowledge of the lower halls. The town grew restless with gossip, and families began to fear what their children might have been exposed to all along. Yet for the detectives closest to the case, the haunting truth was clear. The janitor had discovered something inside the forgotten depths of the school, something powerful enough that someone wanted it hidden. And the chilling question that now hovered in everyone's mind was not only what he had seen, but whether he was still alive down there, trapped behind that locked door that no one was being allowed to open. Despite the official order to seal the lower halls and suspend the search, a small group of detectives who had been with the case from the beginning could not let it rest, and late at night they returned quietly to the school, bypassing the tape and reopening the drywall section that had been hastily patched, their flashlights cutting once again into the stale air as they descended the narrow stairs, driven by the sense that the missing janitor's fate lay just beyond the locked door with a steady humming behind it. Their steps echoed against the concrete as dust swirled in the beams of light, and though the place looked abandoned, faint disturbances in the dirt, fresh scuffs, dragged marks, suggested someone had been there recently, which both terrified and emboldened them, because it meant the janitor, or whoever had taken him, might still be close. Reaching the door, they examined the bolts and discovered they had been reinforced with an electronic lock, newer than anything else. In the underground, its casing stamped with a corporate logo none of them recognized, and though they lacked the tools to open it cleanly, one officer produced a crowbar, and after minutes of strained silence, the lock gave way with a loud snap, the sound reverberating through the corridor as if waking something from sleep. When the door finally swung inward, what they saw was not the monstrous secret they had half feared but something subtler, more unnerving, a long chamber lined with rows of filing cabinets, sealed crates, and humming machinery that appeared to be filtering air and powering lights, though no one could trace where the cables led, and at the center of the room stood a single desk with papers scattered across it, as if abandoned in haste. On the desk lay another notebook identical to the janitor's, its pages filled with sketches of floor plans, arrows pointing toward hidden entrances, and repeated notes about deliveries at night, and keys exchanged in silence. Phrases that painted a picture of clandestine activity inside the school spanning years, maybe decades. One detective froze when he noticed a thermos identical to the one already found in the other chamber, only this one bore fresh fingerprints, and next to it was a single key labeled Storage 7, which none of them could place on the official blueprints, raising the terrifying possibility of another hidden room somewhere deeper. Before they could process it, one officer's radio crackled, unexpectedly with static, though they had not brought official communication gear to avoid detection, and the sound was so loud in the stillness that everyone jumped, only for a distorted voice to briefly cut through, a voice that one detective swore sounded eerily like the missing janitor himself, murmuring a single word, "Below," before fading into nothing. Shaken, they collected what evidence they could carry, including the notebook and the strange key, and retreated before dawn, their minds racing with the realization that this was no longer just a case of a missing man but of a hidden network operating beneath the school, one that the janitor had stumbled into and perhaps tried to expose. And though they had no proof he was alive, the whispered word over the radio and the presence of his fingerprints suggested he might still be out there, trapped in a place that none of them had yet dared to uncover fully, a place waiting somewhere below, deeper than anyone had yet gone. The case of the missing school janitor reached its final and most disturbing turn when the detectives, driven by the discovery of the strange key marked Storage 7, decided to press deeper despite mounting pressure from higher authorities to abandon the investigation, and their search eventually led them to a forgotten utility corridor behind the boiler room, where a rusted metal hatch, nearly invisible beneath layers of paint and grime, bore the same number scratched faintly into its surface, a door no one on staff claimed to know existed. Forcing it open, they were met with a suffocating wave of stale air and the sight of a cramped chamber lined with shelves of boxes, each stamped with labels from years long past. But at the far end, illuminated by a faint glow of a single still working bulb, was a chair bolted to the floor, chains draped across its arms as though someone had been restrained there, and scattered around it were fragments of clothing and a pair of broken glasses that matched those the janitor had always worn, leaving the team in stunned silence. In the corner, a tape recorder sat covered in dust, and when they pressed play, a distorted voice filled the room, the janitor's unmistakable tone, trembling yet determined, as he spoke of discovering shipments brought at night, of people who came and went unseen, and of his fear that he had become too curious for my own good, his words breaking off abruptly into static, followed by a sound like a door slamming shut, leaving the detectives with only the chilling certainty that he had known his end was coming. No body was ever recovered, only evidence that pointed to a system far larger than a single missing man, a network that seemed to vanish the moment light was cast on it, and when the chamber was later sealed by officials under the guise of structural safety, the detectives who had risked everything to get this far were left with the weight of knowing that the janitor's disappearance was not a random tragedy but the deliberate silencing of a man who had seen too much. The town never received closure. The school resumed its classes as if nothing had happened, and yet in quiet conversations, whispers persisted about the lower halls, the locked rooms, and the faint humming that some claimed could still be heard beneath the gym at night, a reminder that the truth was never fully revealed, and that somewhere, buried in the shadows below, the missing janitor's story remained unfinished, echoing like a warning to anyone else who might look too closely. Months had passed since the school janitor had vanished, and the investigation, though yielding fragments of his life and his belongings scattered across abandoned corridors in the forest near town, had yet to provide a clear resolution, leaving the community in a haze of questions and quiet fear. The detectives who had pursued every lead, traced every note and object, and followed each faint trail had grown exhausted, both physically and mentally, yet none could abandon the sense that the truth was still out there, hidden just beyond reach, lingering in shadows and in spaces people rarely thought to look. And though official reports listed the case as unresolved, the officers continued to return to the school quietly, sometimes at night, flashlight beams cutting through dusty corridors as if hoping for a sign that the janitor's story was not over, a small movement, a flicker, any indication that he was still alive or that the network he had uncovered had not vanished entirely. Over time, the community's chatter shifted from curiosity to caution, parents warning children to avoid wandering the forest edges, teachers hesitating to linger in dimly lit hallways, and the school administration quietly reinforcing locks and monitoring entrances. But the sense of unease remained, a persistent shadow over everyday life, for every room, every closet, and every corridor seemed to carry a memory of the vanished man, the objects he had left behind speaking silently of his presence, of his careful attempts to leave traces, and of the danger that had come for him, leaving questions that could never fully be answered. In the quiet of his former closet, the faint smell of cleaning solution lingered, mingling with the dust, as if the walls themselves remembered him, and occasionally, a notebook would be discovered, a glove, a key, each item suggesting a fragment of a story that could not yet be fully told, a narrative of curiosity, discovery, and the perils of uncovering truths some preferred hidden, and the detectives, while noting each piece, had come to understand that the janitor had become more than a missing person. He had become a symbol, a reminder of the invisible lives and secrets that intersect with our own, of the thin lines between safety and danger, knowledge and ignorance. Some believed that he had escaped, hidden away intentionally to survive, or perhaps taken by those who sought to silence him, a victim of circumstance and human design, while others feared the worst, imagining him trapped somewhere, aware and terrified, unable to reach out, yet leaving subtle clues that only the most observant could follow, and these conflicting possibilities kept the story alive, fueled the whispered conversations, and drove the officers back time and again, each hoping to glimpse the truth just beyond the next locked door or forest clearing. Ultimately, the town moved forward. Lives continued. Children returned to classrooms. Teachers resumed routines, and the janitor became a figure of legend, a cautionary tale whispered in hallways. But the detectives knew that behind every ordinary object, every note left behind, and every abandoned piece of clothing lay a human story of courage, fear, and the relentless search for answers. And while the mystery remained officially unresolved, the evidence he left, those small, hyperreal objects scattered across the spaces he had occupied, served as a testament to his presence, his vigilance and his silent struggle, a reminder that even in disappearance, one can leave a mark, a message, and that in the quietest corners, truths can wait, patient and unbroken, for those willing to see them, leaving the audience with a lingering question that haunted every memory, every discovery, and every shadowed corridor. Had the janitor simply vanished? Or had he left behind a trail that would one day reveal more than anyone could yet imagine?